I'll just give everyone another minute. Just looking at the participants. And I hope everybody knows that if you're a Cisco employee, we do have a WebEx Teams Q&A room where you can put your questions in. So during the Q&A session, Dirk will be calling out names at which point you can unmute yourself. So it's in the chat, but I know that if you join us through WebEx Teams, I don't think you can see the chat, unfortunately. So ping me if you don't have the Q&A team room, or Dirk or Joanne, if you don't have the Q&A room.
Circle, I'll send it out with the meeting invite, and then also for the folks that aren't Cisco, you can go ahead and I think post your stuff in the chat window or the comment section. I'll be monitoring both just to get rid of those questions.
Okay. Well, it's 11:40, and I like to start on time and end on time, so I'm going to get started. I know there are still folks joining us, but hopefully we can start on time. Well, thank you everyone for joining Women in Technology June 4th 2020 session. I really appreciate everyone being on the call. My name is Serpil Bayraktar. I'm the founder of these talks, and I am super excited to introduce our guest speaker today, someone from the motion picture industry. Ted is a futurist at Paramount Pictures. He works with studio leadership and technology owners to explore new forms of entertainment, specifically using virtual and mixed reality. He worked on advanced virtual storytelling in some of the very famous movies like Alien and Planet of the Apes. So he has a lot of history and background in the entertainment industry from a technology point of view and how you tell stories. I met Ted when I was in the Chief Technology and Architecture office. He came in to talk to us about all the new things happening in the mixed reality area, what's coming up. And I see since then he's moved on to the augmented and virtualized human. There's some exciting work. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ted to start this presentation. Thank you so much, Ted.
Thanks, Serpil. Thanks, Dirk. Thanks, everybody, for joining from all over the planet, where I presume you're all watching. Just a quick AV check. You can hear me okay, see me okay, bandwidth is okay, and you see my presentation slides, correct? Yes. Okay. I'm assuming that's a yes. Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to move through a lot of stuff that is part of what I study and practice every day in this very interesting job of being a futurist at a major motion picture studio and a giant broadcast entity, Viacom CBS. So I've updated this presentation with some interesting things that I think relate to some of the current events and current situations that are going on with the COVID situation and things that are obviously quite serious in our world. So the 2020 edition of this, I like to just call the year the world went almost fully virtual, which I think dovetails really nicely into what Cisco does for a living. So what I want to start with is something kind of interesting. So I have this crazy title of being a futurist, but as I was sort of kicking things around, I've really identified who I think the real futurists were about, let's call it 35, 40 years ago. So I think you get that, right? The concept of what is happening on our planet right now with the rapid and overwhelming adoption and understanding of how to use and how to function and how to work with video chat is really an interesting thing just to study in and of itself. And of course, we're on the Cisco WebEx platform, which is one of the many platforms that I use on a pretty daily basis to move through my life now that I'm basically doing everything that I do primarily from home. So if you look at some of these statistics, they're sort of unbelievable as we kind of go through this, right? This was a really interesting little clip. Video calls becoming as popular as voice calls, reaching universal adoption. That's literally over the last few months. This is a little nugget. 62 million downloads in the third week of March. That's the highest number ever seen of downloads of video chat applications. And of course, Microsoft with Skype, a massive uptick in what they're doing. This one, of course, is maybe the most interesting of all, right? In terms of the amount of growth of this small, arguably startup video chat company and where they're going and how big they've gotten. And this statistic is really sort of shocking, right? So Zoom's market cap right now is close to $50 billion, which eclipses every major airline on the planet combined. If you take all of the 7 largest airlines by valuation, their total valuation would be less than Zoom right now. That seems a little unrealistic and unsustainable, but maybe you guys at whatever chat window you're doing can discuss that on your own and let me know what you think. This little nugget I found when I was trolling TikTok. As part of my job, I actually study a lot of youth culture and look at things that youth are doing to try and keep myself relevant and active. So I'll just show you this little clip, which I thought was quite hysterical. So people are figuring out really creative ways to dynamically figure out how to cheat a little bit when they don't want to be on video, and that just sort of made me smile. Okay, so now I'm going to hop into, and you're seeing my my slide. Seeing everything of the slide? Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So so hopping into what I like to talk about and what I like to think about on a pretty daily basis. Just some of these statistics are sort of staggering. Most people check their smartphones, right, their little pocket computers, every 6 minutes of the day. This is pre-COVID, right? Young adults send over 100 texts a day. There are close to 8 billion people on planet Earth. Over 5 billion of them own a cell phone. Over 3 billion of them are smartphones, but only 4 billion own a toothbrush. So there are more cell phones on planet Earth than toothbrushes on planet Earth. This statistic's really interesting. It takes, if you lose your wallet, it takes roughly a day, over 24 hours, to report that you lost it. If you lost your phone, it takes you a little over an hour to completely freak out and start to reporting that it's lost, right? So these are kind of interesting statistics to sort of think about as we move through our data and technology days, pre-COVID. Post-COVID, this is also really interesting to study, right? So this is a clip that I really enjoy just to sort of illustrate the point of how crazy people have gotten in terms of their mobile lifestyles using their phones.
If you're gonna be texting and walking, I'm a seeing eye person. I can help you walk and text.
Excuse me, I see you're texting. I can clear a path for you.
If you'd like to walk and text, right here for you. Excuse me, sir. If you're gonna be texting and walking, you grab up. Good. So you barely paying attention.
Excuse me, pardon me. Texter walking. Texter coming through.
Right? So this is a real thing. It's a real problem. It's not a problem currently because people aren't really walking the streets as much as they used to be. But in the world that we go back to, when people go back to their mobile lifestyle at some point, this becomes a real significant situation, right? And that's a real experiment they did in New York City a couple years ago to see how people would react to something like that. So now let's dive into, and we're going to come back to that moment about the texting and walking thing in a little while. I just kind of want you to keep it in the back of your head. Let's dive quickly into the retail environment. And as part of the stock and trade of a futurist, we tend to look at things in 10-year spans of time, which is really interesting. So let's take a look at kind of large retail in 2006, right? These are the valuations of companies across the board. Likely you've shopped at all these in some way, shape, or form. There's little Amazon down in 2006 with an $18 billion valuation. That's not bad, right? You want to see what happened 10 years later? Here's 2016. So Amazon is now a $500 billion company, right? And all these other companies are shrinking. Walmart is putting up a fight, right? but Amazon is taking over. 2 years later, you all probably know the story, right? Amazon hits $1 trillion market cap. And that was interesting. Now flash forward from 2018 to 2020, and here's even more dramatic, right? Both Sears and JCPenney are basically done. Nordstrom, Macy's, they're all primarily struggling to the point where they won't maybe survive. Target increased a little bit, Walmart increased a little bit, and here's our friend Amazon at $1.2 trillion valuation, right? Now, here's what's interesting, and this may be interesting from a Cisco perspective. If you look at other companies that live in the giant market valuation and think about what they all have in common, these are all companies that have figured out a virtual layer onto the physical world in various forms. They either make devices to help people access the virtual world, or create services to access the virtual world, or create games to activate the virtual world, or create commerce to activate the virtual world, right? Be interesting if someone wants to pull up where Cisco fits in this, because Cisco is indeed a company that has built success on top of a virtual layer of physical objects and virtual needs, right? So it'd be kind of interesting to see when we get to the Q&A where that sort of stacks up. Okay, so now I'm going to cover a little bit about my background and how I've come to this day talking to you all at Cisco. This will probably save us 5 minutes of the Q&A, because most of the time the first question of the Q&A after a session is, how do you get to be a futurist and how do you even manage to have this job? So I actually kind of had to answer this a lot, and I thought it was really interesting to reflect back on my past to sort of figure out how I got there. So I grew up in this place, which I lovingly call the funnel of crazy. And if you don't know what I mean, we're going to show you that in a second, right? More specifically there in Central Florida. When I was a little kid, my parents moved me down here with my brother, and we planted ourselves in a place called Orlando, Florida, which at the time was not the Orlando you know today. It was pretty backwoods kind of place. It was very agricultural. They were growing oranges, and it was not a place for a young little boy from Brooklyn that had sort of a life with lots of different people and different society in his life to drop into this world, right? That was year one of my life in Florida. Year two, this showed up. And I was sort of thrust into the future, into a place where new ideas were relished and new thoughts were cherished. And the idea of failing and trying new things was respected and part of their business ethos, right? So this happened to drop into Orlando, Florida, literally into my backyard. So as a little kid from the age 7 on, I kind of grew up in the land of the future, in the world of the future. And it sort of set an interesting stage for the stuff that I ended up working on and building and some of the products I helped sort of bring to market. So when you really think about it, I'm less of an actual futurist and I'm more of kind of a diplomatic disruptor. And I'll show you some of the things that I built in a second. But before we do that, as we talk about this loving place called Florida, this little clip showed up a week or so ago in my world, and I just thought it was so perfect to define Florida in the current state of the world that I thought I'd show it to you.
And now, even during a pandemic, Florida just can't help but be Florida.
A judge in Florida published a letter expressing his frustrations with recent attorney appearances, including a shirtless male lawyer and a female showing up to virtual court from under her covers in bed. Only in Florida, protective masks made from python skin.
Only in Florida do you see a manatee and an alligator swimming together during quarantine.
Take a look at the public service announcement what Florida County is putting out.
The state of Florida declared that the WWE was an essential business.
Only in Florida would a man pretend to have coronavirus to try and get out of an arrest.
Why does this always happen in Florida? I know, right? Always Florida, always Florida. Florida man, Florida man showing up to court. A lawyer, put your shirt on. Come on, Florida, put your shirt on.
So that's where I grew up. My parents, I know, are very proud right now. But there's something about how crazy Florida is that brings interesting people to the fore. So it's an interesting part of my life and my background. Okay, moving on. This is some of the stuff that came out of that crazy Florida background of me willing to take risks and try new things and disrupt. So I ended up working for 7 years in tandem with Apple building the bones of what we now refer to as desktop video. Then went on to a little startup that created hard drives for Apple computers. That's still the most well-known brand in the space. And then I went in to help start a company and help build this movie camera that essentially revolutionized the movie industry and sort of changed that for the good in many, many ways. So that's like a 2-second version of 35, 40 years of my life. And then when I retired from all that, my friends at the movie studio said, come help us figure out the future, because you've kind of been doing that all along. So that's sort of my background. So that's kind of Act 1. That's kind of what I wanted to start off with. Now I want to sort of go into Act 2, and I want to talk about things that I think are relevant in terms of some of the thought process that I think a company like Cisco would want to be thinking about and putting a fair amount of energy and resources on, which is basically the evolution of the screen and the stories that evolve from screens, right? So if we look at these screens on the screen now, on the screen that you're looking on, from our great-grandparents and our grandparents and our parents' house, and then we look at a screen that we typically would have in our house today, our modern screen, I would argue that these are more the same than different. Now, arguably that screen there, the fancy high-end 4K LED screen, is super high res, it's very thin, it's very flat, and it's very large, but it's functionally and fundamentally the same thing that has come before it for 3 or 4 generations, right? So that's the TV side of screens. Now, if we look at sort of the interactive screens, what we call computers, we look at similarities and differences. And again, I would argue that while the laptops on the side and iPads and phones and everything else are way more evolved, they are fundamentally the same device. They do the same thing. They define a screen by a border and by a limited amount of real estate, right? The change in the dynamic of screens that is so monstrous and so important is when screens really went mobile, when you could take it with you. So now you have that same screen you used to have in your house or you used to have on your desk, but it has the same, if not more functionality, and it's small enough to take it and put it in your pocket. And effectively what people have worked on and put billions of dollars of research on is to develop a screen and a technology stack that was as big as it could possibly be while still fitting in your pocket. And that was the goal, right? So that's where we sit with screens today, but they're still all very similar. They still have what we call restricted real estate. So now let's look at what I like to refer to as the digital metaphor. And we look at all these images and we think about what we have done with our lives. Basically, we've taken almost everything we would have done a generation or two ago in the physical world and brought that into some digital version. So when we send mail now, we don't write it on paper. We do a TV version of mail, right? And that's basically a little TV screen that we have with us all the time. When we read newspapers or magazines on an iPad or a Kindle, we're doing a TV version of that. When we gossip or socialize on Facebook or Instagram, we're doing that on. When we open up a map on our phone or on the navigation screen in our Tesla, we are basically using a TV to do that. When we're shopping, which of course, as we know, is $1 trillion industry, we are effectively doing TV shopping, right? And when we're doing this, which is what we're doing now, we're having a meeting and I'm giving a keynote address and we're having a discussion, everybody's on a little TV and we're watching TV all day long, right? So we figured out basically to TVize the world, but still all trapped in some sort of rectangle. So I could almost guarantee that every single person watching this is watching this on some sort of rectangular or square device where we know where it starts and we know where it ends, right? So now let's go into Act 3 of our little discussion here and start to ask the next logical question. That's the first Mac I ever owned that my parents bought me, thank you. And that's my current Mac, right, that I can keep in my pocket. They're fundamentally the same thing. They do almost the same thing with a lot more advancements in this one, right? But the question mark is there because I have this open question that are we ready to break out of the rectangle? Sounds like someone is unmuted. So the question is, are we ready to break out of the rectangle? Are we ready to start moving past this metaphor that we've had for multiple generations now? So this is my thesis. And this is why I believe we're going to wear our technology, and that is the next massive revolution. So these are some photos I took when the world was before it is today on a trip I made to China last year. And I was noticing how many people were all day long looking down at these little shards of glass, right? All day long. And if you look at that kid there, I was pointing to that one. If you see that kid with the 14-hour battery pack, probably playing Fortnite on the subway, right, or in the airport or wherever he is, you don't think he's going to have neck or back problems like he already does, and he's probably 13 or 14 years old, right? I took this picture in the airport in China on another trip to China. This is one of the large cell phone manufacturers in China. And if you look at this ad, this is a giant billboard inside the airport. What are they telling you about this cell phone, right? They basically should have a logo or some words on there that says, this is not a phone. In fact, it is the least thing of a phone you'd ever have. It has a phone application, but it's a visual device that you hold up in front of your face all day long. So if you think about how we're going to evolve from the form factor of literally just holding it up in front of our face all day long, that's what all the largest companies in the world are working on now, and a whole bunch of little startups that may outpace some of those large companies. This is some pictures I took, little sort of spy shots of a young girl in Korea on another business trip when I was in Korea. And I was noticing as she was watching this, how engaged she was watching that screen. And I thought to myself, if we gave her something better that didn't have the form factor that she's looking at now, she's probably young enough that she would make the migration and the adoption very, very quickly and very easily. She would look at the next thing we brought her and discard this current thing as the less evolved and less valuable one. So what we're really looking at is the next and next generation of kids that are going to adopt new technology and will lead the way, which has always been the way for every generation. So that sort of brings us to a discussion around this term virtual reality and a little bit of the history of virtual reality. So if you look at these magazine covers, these are from the mid-90s when there was a prediction that VR was going to be something and be something meaningful. And if you look at that one from like the summer of 1995, right, VR goes mass market. Well, that didn't quite happen for obvious reasons and some inobvious reasons. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit, right? But this was, in the mid-90s. People were starting to realize that this might be a thing, that we were going to break out of the rectangle. So I want to show you this video. This was really hard to find. It took me a long time to find it, of a piece of my history from the late 90s when Disney in Orlando, and remember I was in Orlando, opened an indoor theme park experiment called Disney Quest, and they put one of the first commercial virtual reality attractions into the world.
Hello, I'm Michael Eisner. I'm here in the virtual reality studio where Disney Imagineers are creating a whole new world of storytelling. Tiny TV screens inside this headset actually allow you to step into the world of Aladdin on a magic carpet ride. It's called virtual because it's a world which only exists inside a computer. Reality because unlike film or television, you see not just what's on the screen, but what's above, around, and behind you. And you control when you return to the real world. I wonder where the exit is. Oh, well, welcome to the wonderful world of Disney.
So I got a chance to do this multiple times and thought it was fantastic and thought it was really going to go someplace. The biggest challenges with this was that the headsets they had to build were custom. Each one cost over $500,000 per headset to build. And the computers they ran, for any of those that are on this chat that are sort of computer history centric, was something called an SGI Onyx. Each one of these required their own SGI Onyx computer, which was $1 million computer. So every single one of these little attractions was $1.5 million to install. So couldn't get to scale, right? That was 1998. Now, let's flash forward 20 years later. This is me and a buddy and my daughter in Japan inside today's version of Location VR. So we're sitting inside a very popular game for the Nintendo called Mario Kart, except we're not just playing Mario Kart, we are living inside Mario Kart. We are literally driving the cars. Now the headsets are just a few $100s. The computer systems to run it are in the low thousands. And the most expensive part of this whole getup is those custom little rigs, but they're nowhere near $1 million to build them. So this is starting to become a thing, right? The idea that we can start to use these devices to look at new forms of entertainment and take them to mass scale. For those that have listened to podcasts I've been on or read some of the press, that I often get quoted with this quote that says, one of the wonders of VR is you can literally wear a theme park on your face. And that's kind of what's one of the things that's sort of interesting about virtual reality. So as we look at this 20-year journey, this is kind of a few years ago now VR, right? So this is like 2015 and on VR. And if we look at the numbers, these are home VR and mobile VR headsets that were designed to go into the first wave of consumerism, right? And these numbers would be considered very modest by some people, but for people like me, these are actually very, very encouraging numbers. So in 2016, 6 million headsets were sold. 2017, 8 million. 2018, 13 or so million. By 2019, we got 17 or so million of these various headsets onto the marketplace, right? Which is interesting for a lot of reasons. But still a big challenge with this. And if we were doing this in person, I would do a little guessing game and ask the audience to guess what BOF stands for. And BOF very simply stands for box on face, which is what these devices all are by form factor, right? So I'm going to show you some, they're all floating around my world. So the biggest challenge with these devices never getting to a mass adoption stage is they're still effectively a big clunky box that you wear on your face. We need to evolve past that to get to real significant numbers. But these numbers are significant enough to be meaningful, and these are some charts from different sort of research firms that are predicting the growth of virtual reality, right? So by 2020, 2021, this is kind of the numbers that we're probably going to get to, which is interesting. And what's also kind of interesting is to look at some of the mispredictions on some of this stuff, right? So a Fortune article from 2016 predicted that there'd be 200 million VR headsets sold by 2020. I could have told them they were probably going to be a margin of error off on that, right? Here's another one that predicted, this is from FeatureSource, in 2016, they predicted by 2020, they'd sell 68 to 70 million devices, probably way, way overstating how quickly people change, right? This is probably more accurate in terms of where things are sitting and where they're probably going to be. By 2022, 2023, we'll have 30 to 40 million of these devices into the world. And that's probably the acceptable rate of success based on what we call the friction points of these heavy, clunky devices. And by no means is this a criticism of what these devices are. These devices are remarkable. I'm going to show you some of the things they do and how they do it, but they are not at their end game yet. They are not at the proper form factor and the proper power and the proper use case yet, but they're getting there, right? So we're paying a lot of attention to this. Now I want to take a little departure. And I guess if there's any issue with bandwidth or you guys not seeing this, someone needs to just text me or give me a clue that it's not working, because I'm just talking in a vacuum here and assuming you're all getting it and it's all working okay.
See it well. Okay.
It's all good?
Yes, it's all good.
Great. Okay, good to know. Because usually when you give a presentation, you get feedback, right? So I'm just sort of like sitting in my little office talking for no reason here.
Oh, yeah.
So let's take a little side departure and talk about a consumer product that I think is really, really important to think about for 5 minutes and reflect on its importance in the marketplace and its importance on driving the future of entertainment. So I presume if I was asking you for a show of hands out there, who had a Nintendo Wii and played it, a lot of people would raise your hand, right? It became a very successful consumer device. What's interesting about this gaming system is this was way more than just a normal gaming system, because it was a full simulation machine for the living room. And virtual reality at its best is simulation behavior. We're actually creating simulated environments and simulations of things that would happen in a real world or an artificial world. So the wonder of the Wii, even though it was still a traditional screen you looked on it on, still a rectangle, right, or a square, you could literally let grandma bowl in the living room. The kids could play soccer in the living room. You could play tennis in the living room, and you were simulating that it was really happening. And part of the reason we knew this was the beginnings of virtual reality for the home is when these devices first got released, people, the folks at Nintendo didn't realize they needed to put safety straps on the controllers. And people would get so into what they were doing that they would literally wing their controllers into their expensive TVs and break them. So finally, Nintendo started to realize that they needed to put rubber gaskets on these things and safety straps, right? But this is an important moment in time as we look at the current state of VR, which is this device here, which is called an Oculus Quest, where we remove the computer. We basically built the entire VR system into something that is the beginnings of an actual consumer good. So I refer to this as good box on face virtual reality. And you're seeing a little marketing video that they released. Now I want to show you something really interesting. If we go back 25 years and look at the launch video of the Nintendo Wii, look at how similar what the people playing the Wii are doing versus the marketing video from Oculus, right? So spatial simulation entertainment for the home. There's their videos, right? More the same than different. Now, given the screen itself is much more advanced and the screen tracks with you, and we've broken it out of the rectangle. But fundamentally, it's kind of the same thing, which is kind of interesting. And as you see some of the games that we play, they are very much like modern Wii games, which is sort of interesting to think about, right? So this device that I have here is what's called a 6 degree of freedom virtual reality device, meaning you can look around and move around with it, and it knows where you're looking, and it understands that the rectangle is no longer a fixed moment in time now. It works like your eyes work. As you look around the room, things change, right? And as you move around the room, things change. And this device you can buy for under $400 with some caveats, which I'm going to tell you about in a second, right? But it's a low-cost, high-quality device from Oculus, which Facebook bought a few years ago. And they have become one of the real leaders in this space. Okay, so this, what I'm going to show you now, is the most popular piece of VR entertainment to date. So popular that Facebook bought the company that makes this because this company was doing so well. This is a game called Beat Saber, and for anybody that has a VR headset, you've likely played it. This is what it looks like. You basically chop blocks to music inside virtual reality. So this girl is a VR expert, a Beat Saber expert, and what she is seeing is these things coming at her like it was really happening, right? But if you think about it, this is not that much different than Wii Tennis or Wii Boxing or Wii whatever, except that she's inside the game, right? So this stuff became so popular that across last Christmas, these devices were selling out all over the world, completely sold out, right? Here's what's really interesting, is that during the last few months with COVID kicking in across the planet, the best VR device is hard to find at the because their suppliers come from China, right? And they couldn't get more shipments in because the world effectively closed down. Everybody wanted one and nobody could buy one. So I felt very, very lucky that I happened to have my gear with me in my home environment, right? It's very, very interesting. Now they're finally, and as we sit in June, starting to ship, but there was like price gouging on these things. You could buy them on Amazon for 3 or 4 times, and eBay 3 or 4 times their original retail price because people wanted them so bad and literally couldn't get them. So it's an interesting moment in time. So let's just sort of wrap this up by a thought that I have a lot about rectangles and squares, and think about for the many, many generations of your life, how much and how many things we do that's focused on just looking at something that represents itself as a rectangle or a square, right? Art galleries, museums, television, movies, phones, books, they're all sort of this bounded real estate, right? And we've lived our whole lives about these kinds of bounded real estate for many, many generations. So I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking about those numbers of VR success and how shocking they are at their success, even though a lot of people are claiming that that's not the success they wanted to see out of VR. I like to put it this way. If I asked you, every single one that's watching this, and I told you that no longer will you be drinking drinks in devices like this anymore, that there will be no cups, no mugs, and we are going to move to a totally new way of drinking. We are going to evolve it into something that might have some tenets of a mug or a cup, but won't be a mug or a cup anymore, right? That'd be a giant, monstrous sea change. VR, in my opinion, is like that. It requires so much of a mental change to understand how big of a leap we're asking people to make, because they've lived their whole lives and defined their whole lives by some sort of rectangle or square, that when we ask them to take on a new device that breaks that metaphor and says it's no longer a rectangle or square, it will know where you're looking and it will build that reality around you. That's a big change, right? So with that in mind, we look at the success of this Oculus device, that 10 apps have sold over 2 million in revenue, and that Oculus has told us that they've sold $100 million of games and apps, all living on this device, which is arguably selling still in very, very small numbers, right? So there are enough people in the world that are willing to not drink out of a glass anymore, that have figured out that they're going to try and drink out of something new. And that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. So now I'm going to talk about sort of current times, and I'm going to show you a couple of video clips of what I just referred to as pandemic VR. this is one of my favorite applications currently to do in Oculus Quest. This is something called Supernatural, and it's kind of like that Beat Saber game meets Peloton because it's an active workout game that you do in VR.
Leanne. Welcome to Lake Baikal. Take a moment and just look at this place. Today's workout is all about finding that moment of appreciation. We are really going to get ourselves into the present moment. One of the easiest ways to do that when you start to get overwhelmed is to just take a breath and come back to now. We're not worrying about the future. We're not worrying about the past. It's all happening right here. Take a deep breath in and let's get started. All right, let's get this warm-up started with 2 big strikes right here. That's it. When I see these double targets, I really think about twisting my hips into them, using all the power. Hips.
You get that? Here's another little clip of it.
All right, where's that breathing happening? Try to let it come from the belly here.
So I do that kind of workout almost every day. I did it an hour before this talk. There are also a lot of boxing simulators in VR that I really like. Here's what that looks like.
Yes, yes.
And this is one I did literally this morning right before this talk.
This one's pretty quick. It's not really one I learn a whole lot from, but I thought it was interesting just because I'm getting my flow down. I'm calming myself down in between rounds and fights. And then while I'm in the fight, when I step back, I practice a little bit better breathing and plan out my.
So I think that's kind of an interesting sort of touch point. If you're interested in this stuff after the talk, I can send you links to this stuff and where to buy this stuff. And it's a really good way to stay healthy while you're stuck inside and break out of normal watching TV and looking at a screen on a video chat all day. VR is also starting to find a real sweet spot for social and work collaboration. And these are some of the companies that are doing that. I'm working really closely with almost all of these. So I'm going to show you a couple of like real-time clips of the last few weeks of my life doing this stuff.
I'm in a VR headset. We support more than 15 different VR headsets. Pretty much if you've got a headset that plugs into a computer, we support it. I have 2 VR controllers in my hands, and I can use those controllers to like work with the world. Fine, right? Exactly. So I'm inside VR, and I'm broadcasting out of VR into video chat. And I'll explain a little. Let's go to camera 1 here so you get a pretty good alignment. Hi. And so what you're now seeing is Brad in his, gym shorts, but Brad also in his professional tech bro hoodie and skinny jeans here in VR.
So that's something called Spaces. This is something called Spatial, which works cross-platform on multiple devices. So this is a mixed reality device called Magic Leap. I use this almost every day, and this will work in multiple devices. So here's what this looks like.
Recording. Okay, I'm now recording. So there's my friend Bree who works for Spatial, and there's my buddy Elliot who works for Well Played, and the 3 of us are all spatially inside a collaboration environment. So Bree, since you work for Spatial, maybe you want to give a little 30-second intro about what we're doing.
Absolutely. So Spatial is an augmented and virtual reality platform for collaboration. So of course we are all in different locations, and we can hang out, meet, collaborate around really any topic. So
that's that. And then this is my friend Elliot wearing the virtual version of this. So not the mixed reality
and
version.
What's happening is as you're doing that, I'm walking around what you're doing as if this would really be in the real world. So it's way different than a video chat or some sort of web application. I'm literally seeing the backpack as a 3D object. I'm walking up close to it. I'm backing up to see your relation to it. I was watching you annotate. You're basically duplicating what we would do if we were actually in a showroom demo trying to figure out how to market and sell this backpack.
I can even, make it, let's see, that's about me sized. go here and try it on.
And try it on.
Minutes still. Okay, so I'm gonna pick this 3D model, and then I'll walk up to it and I'll try it on. Is that about right?
Yep, that's it. You got it.
So I wanted to pull out this flower, and then because I'm in the Hollands, I can also just pick it up and hand it over to you.
And I can grab it.
Or pull these out.
I can take it and grab it. So now I've taken it with the controller, and I'm moving it around so I can put it on my couch. And I can grab these and put them also on the.
As well as.
There we go.
adding notes. So anything that I say is going to go on to this sticky note. I can say hi, Ted, and it'll all be recorded here.
Great, that's great. So I think this.
So there are people that use this for all sorts of types of meetings and getting content.
So you can see how that might be a little more dynamic and a little more interesting than just living on a normal video chat all day long, especially for people that have to collaborate with objects and people that are working on creative projects and things like movies and TV shows, starting to show its value. So as we kind of come to like the last section of the talk, I want to move away from the virtual reality and talk about augmented or mixed reality. And this will be the last thing we talk about. So if we understand the digital layer and how comfortable we are as humans today with a digital layer on top of the real world as we watch on a traditional TV screen, this is very normal to us, right? This is a very normal thing to understand that we put digital assets on top of video and watch that on TV, right? So what I like to study, and this is a big part of my study, is something I just referred to as moving beyond the box on a face to something that will start to look a little more fashionable, something you actually might want to wear in the real world at some point, right? Eventually, they'll start to look like glasses, like something you will actually wear. And don't just take my word for it. That's the head of Facebook, who you probably know. This is at our annual virtual reality conference. This was about 4 years ago. He came out on stage and said, this is the future of VR and AR, not a big box on a face. Now, keep in mind, this guy's got $4 or $5 billion invested into box on the face VR. And he's telling us that that is not the end of the road. That is just a step in the road. So a lot of what I think about is when does it get right enough, right? Form factor, comfort, UI, UX, we've definitely figured this out when it comes to the ear side, right? Those are Bose sunglasses, which I use on a daily basis on my walks that have audio. And I would imagine a lot of you have these, right? The AirPods, right? That fit in your ears really comfortably. And Apple's been working many, many generations of various things. I better not put them in because it's going to start to turn on and then change my audio signal. But we use those a lot, right? Now, here's what's interesting about this little device. If I asked you to make a prediction on how big the company would be if Apple split off their headphone, their little micro headphones, the AirPod division, as its own company, right? And only sold these as a separate company, it would be roughly the 32nd largest company on planet Earth, right? It would have close to a $200 billion valuation now. It's a little higher than the 175 based on the fact that so many people are buying these for their current needs stuck in their homes and doing their walks every day. So that's an interesting little moment in time, right? If Apple just decided that this should be its own company, it would be bigger than GE, it would be bigger than all those airlines we talked about before, it would be bigger than a lot of companies on the planet. So what we're looking for now is if we know that we got the ears right, will they get the eyes right? Will we get the iPhone and not this iPhone, but the iPhone, right? Is that coming? So this is a little moment. This is almost every mixed reality headset ever developed in the R&D phase. Likely you're never going to wear any of these, right? There's billions and billions of dollars of R&D you're looking at on the screen. Getting a little more right here, maybe, but still not anything you're going to wear on a daily basis. This is a really interesting device from a little startup called Microsoft that you might have heard of that has some pretty good wherewithal to pull this kind of stuff off.
So I'm wearing the prototype HoloLens 2, which is pretty fantastic for a number of reasons. Ergonomics and comfort, the fact that I can flip it up to see you. It's got a much wider field of view horizontally and, more importantly, vertically, so that the natural visual system is more visually logical in this. And as I touch things, it's a more natural approach to touching things. So I'm literally choosing things and picking things and opening a menu and hopping into things just by doing that. So this is most definitely a glimpse into the future of where a visual compute system looks, feels, exists, and starts to become real, starts to become something you would think about using on a daily basis instead of a flat physical screen, either sitting on your desk or holding in your hands. This is most definitely a vision of the future that is starting to become very real now.
So I know there are people at Cisco that are testing devices like this and figuring out future workflows and future use cases for things like this. That's a $3,500 head-mounted compute system, right? It's designed for enterprise and heavy and light industry. It's not designed to be a consumer goods product, but this sort of is.
And I'm wearing the latest incarnation of the Nreal mixed reality glasses. Super lightweight, feels like glasses, looks like glasses. I'm looking at a super high resolution mixed reality world, looking at all kinds of demos, all running off USB-C off a mobile phone. So the device connects, runs power, gets everything it needs from the phone to an ultra lightweight wearable device that feels like glasses on your face.
I have one of those here. I'll show you what it looks like. So I get a lot of this prototype here to test and work with. It's lightweight, it's comfortable, you can wear it like glasses. It's not quite glasses yet, but you're getting the idea that we're starting to get somewhere with this stuff, right? And that's a little interesting company to keep track of. So Facebook, let's go back to them for a second, have definitely talked about very publicly that they are building augmented glasses, right? They have employees working on it. They have basically restructured because of it. They believe this is the bigger opportunity. They're going beyond the box on the face. And now let's talk about my friends up in Cupertino. So very, very specifically, what I'm going to tell you now in the next 2 minutes is nothing that I know or do not know about what Apple is doing in the mixed reality or augmented reality world. This is literally just rumors and speculation and prediction, right? To be very clear, I am definitely not telling you anything I know or don't know about what's really coming. This is just me thinking about it. So what I think about a lot is the watch, right? This little guy right here, how small it is and how powerful it is, right? How it functionally does almost everything as its bigger brother, right? But much, much smaller. And you can wear it on your wrist all day long. It doesn't get hot and only needs to charge once every other day or so, right? Fully functional little microcomputer this big. Imagine if you took this technology and spread it out on a little bit more surface area here and here, because we got more surface area here and here than in this little box. Imagine how powerful that device can be, right? So Apple is definitely doing something. This is just stuff out in the public about the jobs they're hiring, the companies they bought to use their core technology, and how they're ramping up for something, regardless of what that is, right? Something is definitely happening from the fruit company. It's going to happen in some way, shape, or form. Here's a little tidbit of why I think it's going to happen.
So one of the reasons I have a pretty good instinct that Apple is getting deeply involved in augmented reality, mixed reality, is because of a little known app that they acquired, and they acquired the team last year. It was called Hawkeye. And now I'm going to actually use it, and I'm going to control my iPhone with just my eyes and a smile. So I'm going to launch Google. And I just launched Google. And I'll go back. I'll launch Amazon. Oops, I'll launch Amazon. Okay. And then go back. And I'll go to the next page. And I can go to Yahoo Sports. Oh no, let's try Apple. And I can launch the Apple website. And I can go back. So I'm literally controlling it all with just my eyes and my smile.
So hopefully you're starting to put some dots together here, right? This is from one of the YouTube speculation sites, and I just particularly like this one as maybe a vision of where this is headed. Again, total speculation, but wouldn't it be nice if that was our next computer, right? Or something like that. Kind of interesting to think about. So this is from my friends at Nickelodeon, which is one of the divisions, of course, of Viacom CBS that I work for. And again, still bounded by our rectangle, right? But I want you to watch this demo from Tim Adams, who is the head of Advanced Consumer Products and Consumer Experiences, and start to extrapolate when we break this out of that rectangle and get it onto something that kids will be wearing on their face, like glasses.
So the app is called Do Not Touch. It's free for iOS. And we put a lot of effort here, as you can see, kind of into surface detection, making that super easy for kids. And when you touch the button, you're going to get tons of different experiences. So here we have Whack-A-Monster, which is a really great, beautiful game, in my opinion, where you're earning points, and these points are going to add up into your meter. This is all a bit sped up for the demo. But there's other experiences that are totally different. So here's a world-changing kind of experience where you put on these night ghost vision goggles, and boom, all of a sudden your town or your backyard becomes kind of a haunted ghost village, and you can find ghosts, and there's really no objection to it other than observing. And as you play these, you earn points and you unlock more content. So we have around 100 pieces of content between games and new buttons and new activities in the app. Here's SpongeBob, the most iconic Nickelodeon character that exists.
So that's interesting, right? As you start to think about where this is headed. I'm sure a lot of you have played Pokemon Go and know how that became a phenomenon. There's another wave of this that's happening. So a couple more things to show you, and then we can wrap up. This is me inside an advanced scanning system called a scan truck, which is near the LA airport, LAX. So this was a scan that was done in about 10 minutes after I gave a speech at a technology conference, and they had the truck there. It's 100 or so cameras that basically capture me posing in a few different ways. So I'm literally not doing anything other than standing with my hands down, my hands up, my hands to the side. And I literally was in this thing for about 10 minutes. They took that material, that data, and they turned and made it into a digital me dancing. And trust me, I do not know how to dance at all, much less like what you're going to see from this little clip. So that's literally a digital me, right? That's literally the clothes I was wearing that day. If you saw in the little, when it gets close to me, you could see like the 5 o'clock shadow. You could see every hair on my head, the salt and pepper gray hair. You could look at every little bead of texture of the Allbirds sneakers that I'm wearing. And that was my time, 10 minutes, and then a whole bunch of time afterwards to make a digital me, which is kind of an interesting pursuit for movie studios these days in lots of ways. This is probably the last piece of video I'm going to show you because I think we're getting right around the 45-minute time frame that you guys wanted for the talk. So this is something we're experimenting, again, using the iOS platform and the iOS layer on an Apple device, which will, again, move outside of that rectangle at some point around what we call augmented video layers. So this is some work that I'm doing with a pro bono, and I'm just going to roll this and you'll see it. This is the behind the scenes, the green screen, and then you'll see me demonstrating it with the iPad. This is some of the experimentation and exploration that we're doing with a small startup out of San Diego called Embly that has an application that allows augmented video to be real and hyper photorealistic. So a couple days ago, we've been doing a lot of shooting and a lot of experimenting. A couple days ago, we shot a musical artist, a songwriter, singer named Joe Sumner. So I'm going to launch him on the app. Fire up the stage in our living room here, and it's looking for a stage to place him. There he is.
Hi, I'm Joe Sumner.
And I'm size him up to size. Now you can see he's basically in the living room, right?
The frontline workers during the COVID-19 pandemic.
And now I'm going to hand off
I'm going to play a song for you. It's called Hope.
the iPad. And I'm going to go sit and watch. Joe's over there.
I got money in my pocket. Shoes on both my feet. I got a family who loves me. And we have a place to sleep. Everything is perfect, but I can't relax just yet. I'm the king of being too careful. I'm the master of regret. I'm afraid of the future. I'm afraid of the past. I'm afraid that the life I took so long to love is going
Now
by.
it's really interesting because the augmented technology is I can go sit behind this way.
Is it love that
There's
lasts
still over there,
forever?
and now I'm literally behind it.
Won't you come back to me? Oh, won't you come back to
If I had my
me?
guitar, I could play along.
Oh, won't you come back to me?
So this is an interesting area that we're pursuing, and we think there's definitely some interest in this. As we wrap up, this is an interesting thing for you to sort of wrap your head around. How much data do we create every day? This is pre-COVID, keep in mind, right? Over the last 2 years, 90% of the data in the world was generated, right? So you think about every piece of content ever created from the first cave paintings all the way up to the last 2 years and what data footprint that is. In the last 2 years, we generated 90% of the data in the world. Now think about how many people are video chatting every single minute of every day all around the planet that were never doing that before, or maybe doing that once a week or once a month. Think about how much data that's created. Think about everything we're virtualizing now because of the COVID situation that we wouldn't be virtualizing fully before. We have moved exponentially to a larger data footprint. So the companies that are going to thrive and benefit from that, Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, a little company called Cisco that we know about, a few others that are really going to take advantage of this situation, right? More and more data is required and more data is living. I'm going to skip this for now. This is a 5-minute video of me showing mixed reality gameplay. Let's call it 3-minute video. And if you want, after the Q&A, we can go back to it if you want to watch it. But I think we're right around 45 minutes, which is how long they wanted the talk to be. So we'll skip this and then I'll come back to it. If you want to sort of keep a running tally of some of the things we talked about and refer to it, when I gave a talk similar to this a year ago, they drew a kind of a cartoon of our journey. So this is kind of a good way to remember all the things we talked about over the last 45 minutes. So, and we can send you these slides if you want them, but if you want to take a snapshot of that, that's what we talked about. And last but not least, this is in my wallet. I could prove it to you if you wanted to see it. With time, the impossible becomes the possible. That's basically my mantra. That's what I work on for this large media organization, is to look at things that might seem impossible and see and turn them into the possible. So there you have it. There's your 45, 50 minutes or so. And now I guess we can open it up to Q&A. So I'm going to exit out of my screen share, I think, by this. Sharing Keynote, stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ted. That was very interesting to see the whole history. Yes, that was great.
We did that for a pretty good long time. I was like, I have no idea if anybody's even listening anymore, if it's even working at all. So
no, we are talking in the background, so you be sure of that. And there are questions, so I will ask Dirk to help with the questions. But thank you so much for the history. Also, it provides a lot of context and what's going on. That's fascinating.
Pleasure.
All right, excellent. First question we have up, Luisa Cabrera. I mean, you could go ahead and unmute yourself. You don't have to put on your video. Up to you.
Hi, Ted. Thank you so much. What happens when you use like me and contact lenses are not an option? So when you want to use those glasses that Apple is going to make, what is the option there?
Stand by, I'll show you. So there's a couple of ways to attack that problem, but one of the most interesting ways is, I think, the simplest way. Now I just got to figure out how to open this box, which might be harder than it looks. Oh, it's because it's taped closed. Oh my goodness. All right, hold on. I'm gonna get another set. Stand by. That'll be this might be a bad idea to show you rather than tell you. But one of the simplest, most logical ways to attack this problem is if you wear glasses, these are little magnetic inserts for the mixed reality headset that literally just, if I can show you, here's another one of these prototype headsets, that literally just snap in to it like that. So boom, now it's on. You can see it there. So that's one way to do it. There are more sophisticated ways that other companies are doing by pre-measuring and making like special glasses that go and insert into the eye box of the various devices. But I actually think these little magnetic glasses that are like kind of like clip-ons are the smartest and most effective way to do it. It's almost like that metaphor of, I don't know how much money that the NASA spent to design the pen that write upside down, and then the Russians just sent a pencil, right? So there's your pencil. So there are definitely solves for it for VR and AR glasses.
Thank you so much.
Let's direct. There's another question on the WebEx team site from Chelsea Shen. You could go ahead and unmute yourself and turn on your video if you like.
Hello, Ted. Thank you for a great presentation. My question is, can you talk about any progress that have been made in VR wearables where they are trying to help make the world more accessible to disabled people? For example, a pair of glasses that transcribe speech to text real time for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, or any other use cases along those lines.
Yeah, so a lot of that is already happening. That device and the software that I was showing you, the Magic Leap and the spatial software, allows a text-to-speech right inside their software so that you could read what someone's talking about in real time and post sticky notes. Oculus has text-to-speech for all of their search functions. So this device, a lot of stuff here. This device, if I was wearing this and you and I were talking and I wanted to do a text search, I wouldn't have to type. I could do a text search and it could read it back to me. So they are basically taking advantage of what has been built into the operating stacks of like Microsoft and iOS, those same metaphors of how they make more accessible use cases. And a lot of companies are putting weight against that. They know it's important and they do it.
Thank you.
All right, another question on the WebEx teams. Marcus Reccioni, you can go ahead and announce yourself again if I got that name wrong, but yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. We have Marcus. Let's see if I can find you there. Hi, Marcus, I have you unmuted now. Did you want to ask a question?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, thanks. A double mute. Huh? Thank you. Yeah. So the question is around bandwidth. Does bandwidth, with all this great technology, does bandwidth become an issue? And I wanted to see, do we ever see if it does, do we see when that will potentially get smaller, or will we always expect a certain amount of lag from a bandwidth standpoint?
Yeah. So bandwidth is a big topic of discussion, research, figuring out. There's a lot of thought process around de-weighting the device, right? So this device is essentially not all that smart. It has all the optics in it, but as you saw in that little video clip, the power of this device right now comes from the smartphone, right? So the smartphone has the data, and that enables the device to stay nice and lightweight and nimble and functional. In terms of the broader scope of looking at the data dynamics of these things and how we're going to manage that, it relates to 5G, which could obviously be a whole nother separate hour of discussing advanced bandwidth and mobile bandwidth at a different level, and latency that's different than 4G and 3G, which is a big deal. So all the big telcos are working on that all around the world. And then there's something, if we want to get even more technical, there's something that we call split rendering, where certain things can happen on device and certain things can happen off device. Depending on what those things are, they marry together in the final deliverable, so that enables you to be more dynamic with what you need to park on the device that uses up the compute cycles and the bandwidth of the device, versus this wonderful metaphor that we call the cloud, right? And everything related to the amount of compute power that we have sitting above us and around us all around the planet that needs the fastest pipe in. So as we get there, we start to achieve that objective. Does that answer the question? It may have gone a little.
No, I think it does. I would say that, maybe I think it's something that probably a lot of people think about. They may or may not talk about all the time because, I see this great technology, great software, but I almost feel like if it still feels kludgy or clunky, I imagine adoption is still going to be a tough thing if I start thinking about scalability over the long term. So it helps what you mentioned.
Yeah, the way we like to look at it is none of these devices I showed you today, we would consider those that are working on them every day to be true consumer devices. These are pre-consumer devices. They're early adopter devices, right? They're people that are willing to put up with all this friction and all this aggravation to get there. Over this next 10-year period, so if we start our mark now at 2020, the next 3, 5, 7 into 10 years, that journey from 2020 to 2030, is going to be primarily how to figure out how to make them into a mass market consumer device, AKA something that is a consumer durable like this, that can sell in the hundreds of millions all around the world.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I see another question from Madeline Romer. Madeline, you can unmute yourself and turn on your video if you like.
Hello. You guys hear me?
Yep.
Hi. So virtual reality is awesome, and I think it's going to play an important role in education. My question is, for the next generation, is attending a college going to be critical for them earning a high salary? And if not, or if it is the cost going to continue to increase, or can virtual reality help education be more accessible to more people?
So I think there's a couple of questions in there, right? I think 100% I agree that virtual reality can expand the boundaries of physical education. We're already seeing it, it's already working. And as people get more comfortable with it and find more use cases, a friend of mine named Charlie Fink, who writes for Forbes, he's a good one to follow if you like to do this stuff. He writes a weekly column this week in XR. XR is like the broad topic of virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality. We call it extended reality, XR for short. He's a friend of mine, and he's now teaching a class at Chapman using virtual reality tools because he's teaching an advanced media class using advanced media, right? In addition to his writing, he's teaching where kids are wearing virtual reality to experience their classrooms wherever they are. Because at the end of the day, you can only do so much of this before it just gets exhausted, right? You need something different. You need something that feels more real and more viable. So we see this as part of that 10-year journey. And that's why I showed you some of those socialization apps and communication apps that are really starting to look at this and attack it from a different vantage point than just a 2D rectangular screen and how far we can get with that. So I think that's really interesting to look at. As it comes to the larger education question, I would pose it this way, and I think this is an interesting thing from a Cisco standpoint to think about. In some of my presentations, I talk about the power imbalance of certain companies. And if you go back in time to, call it the Middle Ages, and think about how many people knew how to both write and read, right? It was a very small number of people. So the power could be held by a very, very small amount of people that knew how to write and read, right? Now, through modern times, through the printing press and education, everybody learned how to write and everybody learned how to read, with limited exceptions of people that simply didn't do it, illiterate, right? I mean, but it's a very, very small number of people out of that close to 8 billion people on the planet that don't know how to write and don't know how to read in today's world. Now, here's the most interesting question. Extrapolate this to how many people look at code all day long, literally from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep, versus how many people know how to code, right? And know how to work in a coding environment, which is a modern language. It's the language that does everything we're doing right now and everything I talked about for the last hour. It requires coding to build it, right? So we're at a state in the current time frame of what I would call a new illiteracy, meaning everybody knows how to read. Everybody can go on Facebook. Everybody can use their iPhone. Everybody can open an app. Everybody can play Angry Birds, right? They're accessing code all day long. They're reading. But a small subset of that are people that know how to write that material, create that material. we're probably at the biggest imbalance in the entire written and documented history of the human race, of the amount of people accessing versus the very small amount of people that know how to make it, right? So if you look at a company like Facebook, for all the pros and cons and arguably like what they've done, they have a humongous power base because they know how to code. They've coded the social environment and everybody uses it. But because we don't know how to code the rest of the planet, we can't compete with them. So they build more strength and they continue to build more and more strength. So you have an imbalance, right? So my biggest education platform is not about like helping kids how to figure out math and helping kids how to read. That's of course important. But the biggest thing I think where the biggest gap is very few kids know how to code. And if kids learn how to code even a little bit, even if they're not going to be professional coders in their life, if they understand the language of coding and what it means, even a little bit, they'll have more strength, they'll have more power, they'll have more negotiating power. They can do different things. And it doesn't mean they're going to sit in front of a computer and code all day. It's just, you learned how to read in school, therefore you could do this, right? So that's my argument. Maybe that's a little long-winded, but it's my argument.
No, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I know we have more questions, Ted, but we're kind of out of time. I just want to thank you on behalf of everyone attended, and thank you everyone for attending this session. We would love to have your slides and posted on our website later on for reference. And with that, I want to thank you again for making the time for us. This was a fascinating session.
And you can feel free to share my email if there's additional questions or people that want to ask other things. I'm happy to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Will do. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uncle Teddy?
Thank you.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, Max. Hi, Max.
Oh, hi.
That's my cousin. Were you watching, Max?
I'm your nephew.
Sorry, not cousin. It's been a long hour.
Not your yeah, I'm your cousin.
It's been a long hour.
Yeah.
Not cousin, no.
Has your internet been bad?
I don't know. How was it over the last hour? Was it okay?
No, it was, well, when you were like doing the like your face is fine, but like when you were moving through the slides, it was like really laggy.
Oh, it was laggy? No, that's
yeah.
I wonder if that's on your end or my end. I don't know.
It could be either one. My internet's been pretty awful. We can't get fiber here or anything. We have we can only get cable.
All right, Max, hold on for a second. Well, let's call afterwards because I have to wrap this up with Dirk, who's the organizer of the whole thing.
Thanks, Ted. I appreciate it. Everything came through real clear. Wonderful presentation. So yeah, we'll be in touch, and Circle will be in touch also with some post-event details. So I'm gonna wrap this one up and close this meeting off.
Okay. Thanks again. Thanks for having me. Glad it worked out.
Bye.
See you.